Hello and welcome to CTN. To learn more about the show, please visit CIOTalkNetwork.com. And the topic for today is leading in the next normal. So we all know and are living the pandemic, and we have had a lot of disruption and a lot of uncertainty. So we don't know what's ahead of us and not sure if we can ever go back to where we were. So what is going to be our life and the way we do business? What is going to be ahead of us? What will be the next normal, and how will the leaders be required to lead in 2021 and beyond? That's what we want to discuss. And for that, we have Tracy Kerrins, Chief Information Officer with Wells Fargo. Hey, Tracy, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. And we have John Kochavatr, who's the Vice President and Chief Information Officer with Portland General Electric. Hey, John, how are you doing?
Hi, Sanjog. I'm good. Good to be with you.
Great to have you as well. So, folks, let's start with you, Tracy. So the topic itself is telling us that we are going to not have a crystal ball and we will be tested as leaders. So when we start, right, in all our respective, each one has a different track. Some people come from technical background, others come from business and join the CIO's track. But here we're talking leadership overall. The way we get our leadership jobs is through experiences and some grooming, and we are told that whatever is happening, you got to control it, bring it back to normal, and then look how you can incrementally or disruptively improve things. All that was good, but we are in times which we never, and the people who we got trained by, they even did not anticipate. So how much of that grooming do you think you are able to, or you think you can leverage as you go about leading in the times ahead?
I think first I'd say none of us could be prepared for what we've all experienced, or at least I don't believe none of us were prepared, or none of our experiences have prepared us for what we all have been going through over the last 9 months. I think just acknowledgement of that out of the gate is very important. Second to that, the leadership traits that we've all needed throughout the pandemic, I think are pretty core leadership traits. We need them regardless of what we're going through. Things like being flexible, candid, transparent. Those are always needed, necessary leadership traits. What I found, though, is that it's taken a more important role with the concept of empathy and listening and communicating. That's become even more important during this time, to really hear what your teams are saying, what your employees are saying, listen to them. How can you help? Be empathetic. We're all going through this differently. Every situation is different. So never assuming that what I'm experiencing or seeing during this with my family, work, life, etc., is the same as anyone else's. And so I know personally, I really try and sit back and remind myself just to have that really inclusive thinking, and that not everyone is thinking, feeling, saying, or doing the same thing that I am. These things are not impacting them in the same way. And then just communicating. It's important that our teams hear from us, that they're looking for us for stability and guidance, and that we are there for them and that we provide those things. But again, those are all traits I think we need regardless. Just some of them we've had to have become a little bit more important during this time period.
Yeah, Tracy, I would piggyback on your comments. I think you hit the nail on the head. These are leadership traits that they carry over pandemic or no pandemic. But one point that I really appreciated that you made was around how different team members are experiencing this very differently, right? So we're in the IT space, and so many of us are very lucky to be able to work from home. But in our business, at least at Portland General Electric, we have linemen and women that are in the field that don't get to work from home. And so they experience it very differently than office workers. And I think that empathy is so important because it really informs us on how we can help our employees in different kinds of ways.
So let's talk about the not so obvious traits, which we may not have developed, or we developed but hardly used, which we would have to use going forward or have to develop going forward. Tracy.
From a leadership trait perspective, I think we covered that, but I think there are things that we're having to look at from a team perspective, cultural perspective that are different. I think the good thing is we've been part of one of the biggest global experiments in remote work. As John said, not everyone's working remote, but we sure as heck have a lot of people who are. So we are participating in right now in one of the largest remote work experiments. And I know from my perspective, it's worked very well, right? So we've seen how the benefit of collaboration tools, collaborating through tools like this, Zoom or Webcaster, how we can still stay connected, be very productive, not miss a beat. So those, to me, those things are really going to change the way we work going forward. When we look at, do we really have to be in person for that? Do we really conferences, how we get information, how we interact with each other? While that was always something we were looking at, I think we've proven out that we can do pretty well collaborating online, connecting via video, communicating via video. And that's going to be a really valuable tool for us. I think it'll change the way we work, the way we look at work.
So, John, based on what Tracy mentioned, let's look at the scenario on the ground today. We spoke about remote work, but that also has a challenge connected to it because people sitting at home while they're working, but they feel there is an employment uncertainty. There are some health issues and concerns. For the management, there is a business uncertainty, and suddenly going from almost negligible, some companies were more into remote work than others, but suddenly you're into total remote work dynamic. And there is a very high workers' well-being related transparency. In fact, its well-being is opaque. So what people are talking about is there is a lower employee morale. There is unpredictable service delivery. There is potential workforce mental health risk. With that as a scenario, what do you think you would do new, more, or different as a leader because you were not trained for this?
Yeah, so Sanjog, maybe the approach that I would take is, how does a leader lead? And so for us, at least at Portland General Electric, we think about outcomes. So it's less about activities and more about outcomes. And I think even during a pandemic, even in the environment that we're in right now, I think it's more important than ever to focus on and be clear about what those outcomes are. And I think when we can lead on outcomes and less on activities, I think it helps our employees understand what the expectations are for them. That being said, we talked about earlier, everybody's experiencing this differently. I think about myself. I've got 3 little kids that are doing remote school right now. And in a household where you got 3 kids, you got to find 3 laptops and they're in 3 different rooms because they're having different experiences. And I think about some of our employees that they might be in a 1-bedroom apartment with 3 kids. And so that becomes a different challenge. And as you rightly said, there are legitimate mental health issues that we have to think about, because while we say, okay, nobody come to the office, some people love that, but some people hate it because some people need to get away because they can't do their jobs in the environment that they're in. And I think this goes back to the empathy piece I think that Tracy brought up earlier. We just have to be sensitive and find ways to help people cope with some of these dynamics. And whether it's an employee assistance program, if your company is lucky enough to have one, or subsidizing ergonomics. So for example, we offer $300 per employee to get chairs or stand-up desks or whatever they need to be more comfortable. We offer another $500 in childcare. I think those are relatively small gestures to employees to let them know that we're thinking about their well-being and trying to accommodate them as much as we can.
We have to also, like we mentioned, like we're not prepared, and we weren't for what the magnitude of what we've seen, but we are prepared in a lot of ways. And I think it's important that we look at our leaders and our teams and we say, everyone take a breath, right? We need to ground ourselves on what we do know, right? The tactics that we've used, even in dealing with smaller issues, larger issues, fire drills, things, a lot of those skills are some of the same ones that we need now. It's just, it's longer. It's the marathon, not the sprint. So I worry less about the tactics because I'm seeing all the leaders really step up for that. It's the fatigue that we really have to watch out for. And that's where the well-being, mental health, mental wellness comes in, checking on our teams, being empathetic, and realizing that, John, I love your point around outcomes, that the way you get to your outcome may be different right now because it has to be. But as long as the outcome is there and of the same quality, which we're seeing, everyone's being very successful, then that's okay. And it should be okay.
Yeah, and I love that point.
Give ourselves a break. Give ourselves a break a little bit.
Yeah, and I love that point, Tracy, because people will get their work done. They will get those outcomes in different ways. And I think as leaders, we got to be able to flex and say, yeah, that's okay. And as long as we focus on those outcomes and not the how, or that you have to be online 8 or 10 hours a day or whatever it is, I think that's going to help employees find ways to get things done and be successful.
And I don't want to keep dwelling on it, but one of the things I've loved culturally through this with everyone working at home, I think there was a stigma before the pandemic. If you were home, if your dog barked or a child came up to you on a Zoom call or something, that was maybe not frowned upon, but people noticed and you were embarrassed or felt uneasy about it. But now, because we've all been going through this together, I regularly, just on my team meeting a little bit ago, there's a gentleman on the team and his dog's walking around in the back, tail wagging, or a child walks in, does something. And that's just become part of the norm, the new norm of working remote. But it's brought in a new personal side too. And we're learning more about each other and things we didn't know before. Not because we didn't ask or care. It just wasn't something top of mind or that was really present. And it is now. And in a way, that's nice.
Totally.
So, Tracy, just because someone has an executive title doesn't make that person a leader. And it doesn't mean that even the leaders would not have the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, doubt, and anxiety. And you, in your role, have to actually work with both sides, right? You got to have people in management who might be having issues with the way things are, the way the business is, the uncertainty, and they might express it in different ways. And you have to lead them through this. And at the same time, you got people, the direct reports or the nth reportee at the very, like a field staff, who might also be impacted with what's going on, and you have to directly or indirectly lead them. How are you calibrating your leadership muscle to be put on one side versus another? And what are the different ways you lead these two constituents?
Again, and not everybody's good at this, to your point. And I'm not saying I am. And I have struggled myself at different times going through this pandemic, just with taking on new responsibilities and things that I'm working different. John, to your point, I have 3 kids at home too, and who's using up all the bandwidth on the Wi-Fi, things I didn't have to deal with. But to the question, I still, my job, and I take this part of my job very seriously. And I think all leaders need to mentor, coach, and provide counsel, support, and even criticism where needed, where I see other leaders not stepping up where they need to. Now, the empathy comes in with, they may say, look, I know I should be doing that, but I can't. I'm barely hanging on, or I need help. And that is totally okay. But I have to hold my leaders accountable. I'm being held accountable as I should. It's my job. That's my role. And so if I see leaders or teams or people coming to me and saying, I'm not feeling this or this isn't happening, I need to reach out and say, hey, what's going on? How can I help you? The team's feeling like they need more. They're not getting enough from you, or they think this way. How can I help you? And then we have to evaluate it as leaders and managers on, does that person need help? Maybe they just needed a little push start, or maybe they need some more direct coaching and say, you're not holding up your end of the bargain. Like, you're a leader for all these people and you have to be a leader.
Yeah, and Tracy, I'll go up at that point as well. I think, Sanjog, I think about maybe a couple of things. One is, I think leaders provide perspective. And the reality is, this is not our first pandemic, and it probably won't be our last. Hopefully it'll be the last in our lifetimes, but at least in my lifetime, but we're going to get through this. So it's just a matter of time. And so I think sharing that perspective with our fellow leaders and with employees, I think makes a big difference, because then people don't get spun up on things that we can often get spun up on because we don't have that perspective. And 2, and this is something that Tracy alluded to, is this idea of creating a culture of constructive candor and being honest with one another about the things that we can do or that we can't do, given whatever circumstances that each of us has. And I think where we can be honest with one another, it just makes it easier to operate. And in my opinion, at least, I think it takes a little bit of the stress out when you can have a culture where you can be very candid.
And I think especially, I run the Women in Tech group at Wells Fargo, and the pandemic has it's taken a big toll on women in the workforce. And so one of the things we've been looking at is really getting a lot of studies, case studies, information data on what we're seeing and what to look out for ourselves. And one of the things I've been doing, in addition to reaching out to women leaders, but just as myself, I think to your point, John, is being authentic and honest about my own experiences when telling folks sometimes, like, that this is a disaster. I've had to take this on. I I cried on Sunday because of this, and just like being very real, because then it allows people to also say, it's not just me, perhaps make it okay for them to ask for help, because sometimes people are afraid to ask for help, even when you ask them if they need it. And so just trying to be very real, very authentic, because it's therapeutic to me, and hopefully it's therapeutic to others. And it allows others to engage differently, to ask for help, or to just say, hey, I hear you. I'm glad I'm not alone.
And Tracy, I think that helps to really build a degree of trust as well, right? Where you can be vulnerable, people can be vulnerable to you. And I think collectively that just reduces a little of the stress out there, because then you're not pretending to be something you're not, especially given the environment that we're in right now, which is stressful enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's take a quick break, listeners. We'll be right back. And let's set the stage, or at least while we don't have a crystal ball, but at least talk about the kind of permanent shifts we will see in our business environment, which we should be ready for and start preparing. Please stay tuned, listeners. We'll be right back.
Today, enterprise technology is both strategic and global. Each week on CTN CIO Talk Network, IT thought leaders from around the world share their experience with listeners as they discuss with Sanjog Aul how they are trimming costs and partnering with business to innovate and help IT become more competitive, better care for customers, and improve the corporate bottom line. If you want to keep up with IT thought leadership, listen to CTN CIO Talk Network with Sanjog Aul at CIOTalkNetwork.com. You are listening to CTN CIO Talk Network with Sanjog Aul. To learn more about our program, please visit CIOTalkNetwork.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back. So, Tracy, about the shifts in the business environment that you've seen, what are those? Of course, the shifts have always happened, but this would perhaps change the way we think about business, the way we think about partnerships, and the way we think about the workings within the business. Which ones look like we will not fall back to the original ways we used to do things?
From my perspective and the Wells Fargo perspective, our strategy before the pandemic has not changed much. If anything, it's been validated or expedited. So we were already doing digital transformation like many, and we knew that was a focus. We knew our customers and clients want to bank wherever they are. They want mobile digital access. So we were already well down that path. Through the pandemic, we've had all of that validated just through customer interactions with our mobile and online banking capabilities. So if anything, the pandemic's given us a reason or momentum to accelerate some of our strategy and our transformation and our plans. So none of that has really changed. And I think that's good, and that's okay.
So, John, what have you seen? I know in your industry, a lot of things happen. Would you see something fundamentally shifting and you say, awesome? I know while pandemic is not awesome, but the change that has happened is really to your benefit.
Yeah, I think to Tracy's point too, I mean, there's been an acceleration of this digital transformation, and not just within certain businesses like ours. And I could talk about the remote work stuff and how that's going to be probably permanent for some, but just even our day-to-day lives. I think about, I ordered something from Best Buy the other day, and they walked it out to the trunk of my car and they put it in. It was pretty good. I like that. And I think those types of models will continue, and the JCOM models and the DoorDashes and the Uber Eats of the world, I think that continues. And there are new conveniences, I think, that many of us have discovered through this process that are going to stick.
So, John, let's further dig into the internal workings of the organization. So before pandemic, yes, you had HR, you had some productivity measures, you were having some initiatives on how do you change your organizational design so everyone works at the best possible level. And then you had the enterprise performance management, where we looked at all different aspects, financial and non-financial. What do you recommend, given where we are now, to tweak or change or remove or add so that the next normal is not being underutilized because we are in the same old way of doing things?
Yeah, Sanjog, I wouldn't say that this focus on outcomes. I'm going to come back to outcomes because a lot of leaders, at least in our organization, used to measure people for showing up, right? Hey, you show up and you were here for 8 hours a day and you were behind your computer and doing whatever it is that you were doing. And that may have looked like work. But I think now that we don't physically see each other and that it's much more virtual, the focus on outcomes, I think, has been elevated. And I think that continues. And I think it's going to make people become better leaders because now it's not about the activities, right, or the time that you put into the office, but it's going to be about the outcomes that you deliver. And so that, I think, is one big takeaway. And that creates a different kind of environment for people to operate in because now if more people work remotely, it's fine because you're measuring outcomes over activity. And there was this great story that somebody shared with me that I thought was great because they talked about a locksmith and they say, hey, if you've ever locked yourself out of anything like I have, like my car years ago, locksmith comes and he pops the lock in 5 minutes. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I got to pay $200 for 5 minutes of work. That sounds ridiculous, but would I have preferred 5 hours? Because I had to get home and it was 10 o'clock at night. And I think when we think about those outcomes, I think we start to lead differently.
So, Tracy, you mentioned about empathy, and you as a leader would want to show it. And some people who, I'm not saying people are out there to abuse any kind of leverage given or any leniency, but how would you balance? You're a huge organization and you got employees all over, and all of them need that support and empathy from the leaders. But then you also want to fundamentally look at the productivity side because every little thing would matter. And then that's on the employee side. And then talk about then for enterprise performance management, how much slack would you cut to the enterprise leaders or different groups who are supposed to report some growth, some improvements all the time? What would you do so that in the next normal, you are still a profitable business, you are still a growing business, but you are still a business which people want to work with and the employees want to work with?
Yeah, it's a dynamic you have to manage very closely. But I would say we found at Wells Fargo that the move to remote work has been relatively seamless, right? We have over 200,000 employees working remotely right now. And we've always been a performance-driven organization, outcome-based organization, to use John's terms. And we've seen that move to remote be pretty seamless, right? So the way in which people get to the outcome may be a little different. We're all home. We aren't physically seeing everyone every day, but we're seeing each other on video, staying very connected that way. We haven't seen productivity drop. We haven't seen the quality of outcomes drop. We're looking at it and saying we're operating very successfully, and that's good. We are, and when you talk about some of the issues of how do you manage people like taking advantage of it or things like that, and I think that gets back to that's a manager problem, a leader problem. Just because we're home doesn't mean you don't have to still stay connected with your team, have shared goals, objectives that everybody is working toward and holding people accountable. I don't think any of us are saying that, nor is that okay. We do work at companies. They are for-profit companies. We're here to do a job for our customers and clients, and we take that very seriously. So you can't call it in, but we can be more sympathetic and empathetic in the things that people are dealing with and help them get to the end result. We've also done a lot with calling that out and saying, if there's an issue, if you see that there's going to be a struggle, you're not going to be able to meet this deadline or deliver this deliverable on the timeline that we had originally agreed, call that out. And that's okay. There's no shaming in that, right? But we need to know so we can all respond better and together. And to me, that's just all about being a good manager, managing the work. It doesn't matter if you're remote or in the office, right? You still have to manage your team, your own work. You have to do it.
So I occasionally use the quote as healthy doesn't mean lack of disease. And I use this because of course, you responded very well to my question. Now, another side of it is, could this not be seen as an opportunity? So our metric for employee productivity and the enterprise performance management related metric, could that not be dated still how about we change this to become a new metric, which could be in next normal, be even delivering better, not just reducing leakage, but to take the company even forward using this as something positive that happened, not for the pandemic side of it, but the remote workplace dynamic and the people coming together. Could you change these measures so that the company even grows better compared to what it was if there was no pandemic and there was no full remote workforce? How would you have changed it?
Yeah, Sanjog, maybe I'll jump in with that. I'll give you a framework that I think about, and then I'll address your question about taking advantage really of this sort of time. As I think about any team and getting outcomes for a given team, I think about people, process. I think most people appreciate that. But then I look at platform and partners as well. And we could spend a whole other podcast talking about each of those. But let me talk about platform. One of the things that we've done at Portland General, at least, is like we've changed chunks of our digital platform to get better velocity and better experiences for customers. One example is our website. And the website is really integrated to so many different components of our enterprise. And we want our customers to have the ability to manage their own energy journeys, especially since we're really focused on decarbonization. And what we typically have taken a couple of years to develop and design, we did in 200 days. And we totally replatformed our digital infrastructure, and that's allowed us to go faster. And this is something that we did in the first half of the year, but now we have higher velocity in new products that we can deliver to customers in a way that we couldn't before. And despite the pandemic, our teams have rallied around that. So I think your point is a good one, where you can rally around different things like new platforms to get higher velocity in the work that you're doing.
Let's take a quick break, listeners. We'll be right back. And Tracy, when we come back, how about we start looking at thinking employees' motivation, not just getting the job done, move beyond that motivation to innovate, to do something beyond the obvious, like they were, at least that focus was on that earlier when everything was going well. And suddenly this pandemic hits and we came to survival, and rightfully so for some time. But then still we have to take this back to that mode where we are getting into our self-actualization mode, if you will, to maximize our potential. What beyond us showing empathy or giving them $200, John, you said $300, $500 to support them? What would it take? What organizational support? What cultural shift would it take for us to get them to that innovation mindset? Please stay tuned, listeners. We'll be right back.
Today, enterprise technology is both strategic and global. Each week on CTN CIO Talk Network, IT thought leaders from around the world share their experience with listeners as they discuss with Sanjog Aul how they are trimming costs and partnering with business to innovate and help IT become more competitive, better care for customers, and improve the corporate bottom line. If you want to keep up with IT thought leadership, listen to CTN CIO Talk Network with Sanjog Aul at CIOTalkNetwork.com. You are listening to CTN CIO Talk Network with Sanjog Aul. To learn more about our program, please visit CIOTalkNetwork.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back. Tracy, we have had our set of coming back to normal, or at least trying to come there, given all the support to people, empathy, everything, and which is the right thing to do. But then we have to go beyond just getting things done. We have to get into that innovation mode, into self-actualization mode for each party, and as for the organization, reach its maximum potential. So let's talk specific. What specific organizational support, what specific elements of culture that we should shift, and what specific approaches to leadership should we embrace so we get our people into that warp speed mode?
Yeah, I think it's some of the same principles that existed even when we were in the office, right? They may just take on a different lens. So people right now more than ever are going to want to feel safe. So whether they're in the office or working remotely, or when we're asked to go back in, if we are, who knows, they want to feel safe. They want to feel respected. They want to know that their performance is being acknowledged and understood, right? So it gets back to performance management, which was there before and still is. And ultimately, I think people want to win. They want to deliver. They want to deliver for customers and clients, for their teams, et cetera. And that's where the innovation comes in. And I don't think any of those things have changed. Again, it just gets to the way in which we're doing them. So safety has taken on a whole new meaning, whether it's changes to the workplace. As John mentioned at Wells Fargo too, we've had people coming in, working at our banking centers, contact centers this entire time, making sure they feel safe, that everyone feels safe regardless of where they're working. The respect, performance management, it's been there. We've been innovating this whole time in different, new and exciting ways. John gave some examples of where the pandemic has also almost caused his company to do things better, differently, faster. Wells Fargo, we've certainly seen the same thing. I talked a little bit about expediting the digital transformation, but I think, which is great, and it's been monumental. But one of the things I've watched and I think has been very impactful is the way we decision change and review and look at risk with the pandemic overlay. We've had to look at that differently. You make process changes internally that are different and I think better and will be something that we continue to carry forward in the new normal. So all those things are good. I think innovation comes out of feeling safe, respected, and with objectives to achieve, wanting to deliver for your customers and clients. And that's always been there.
So when we talk about a child, right? And John, this is for you. I'm just sharing. I've heard some good quotes from some good wise people. They say a child blossoms when he or she feels safe and feel loved. Can we say that it's true for even adults also? So if we make everyone within the organization feel safe and feel loved, they would blossom. If that's not enough, what else needs to be put in?
Sanjog, I think that's a great quote, but I think it's a good start. And as I think about how we develop employees versus children, I think giving employees degrees of freedom, giving employees candid feedback and regular feedback. So not just waiting until the end of the year to surprise somebody with some ratings. At Pearl in general, we do quarterly feedback sessions and we do bi-weekly meetings, one-on-ones with manager and employees, and they're encouraged to give what we call continues and considers. So please continue doing these two things and please consider doing these two things differently. I think that clear is kind, and many of us have read books around that, but I think where we can do that creates a trust and an environment where people can be honest and innovate in very different ways than if you are more prescriptive about some of the work that you're doing.
Tracy, when you are talking to your leadership, they want to help everyone who's working. They want to see the growth, and perhaps they want it yesterday. How do you guide them or lead them? Or how are you, as part of the leadership team, making sure that, yes, the shareholder value is important, but you will not be able to satisfy them because it's not the same old environment? And how do you resist going after the rush job or getting things done yesterday and focus on doing it at a cadence, at a level where it'll be practical and it will keep you stable without the pressure of the shareholder value?
Shareholder value is always important, should be important to all of us, but it's because it's less value, but more the goal of delivering for our customers and clients. But I think, like, aside from the pandemic, it's the same principles. Some things need to be done quicker, faster, right? To deliver greater value. The need is greater. We want to do it. We need to do it. But you can't do everything all the time right now or yesterday, right? I try and look at everything and be very balanced and say, we need to prioritize, do the things you have to, the riskier things, the things that drive the greatest value, prioritize those, do those first. Pick the top 3 things, not the top 10, right? It's better for us to do 3 things well than 10 things mediocre. And then also be very balanced and measured. Learn quickly, fail fast, right? So if something's not going right, we're trying to do it too quick. Sometimes you have to say, just stop. Everyone stop. Let's take a breath. What have we learned? What do we need to do different? Do we need to change our approach? So I think the answer to the question is just, it needs to be very measured, methodical, prioritize work. You can't have everything right now or yesterday all the time. And that's what burns people out. Nobody wants to do that. Everybody wants to deliver a quality product, right? Nobody wants to have issues. I don't believe, or if you do, you got the wrong people working on your team, right? It's just reminding ourselves. And sometimes I find I put pressure on and I see that pressure in the team. And I have to say, hold up, guys. I know why you're doing that or why we're taking these measures. I think it's because I made this statement. I can see that it's adding too much pressure or stress. Let's stop. We don't need to do that right now. Let me take that off your plate. Let's couch that for a week or two or come back to that later. So I think it gets back to listening, watching as well. You have to have that good EQ side. So while you have to be a hard driver, push things to execute and deliver, you also have to see and watch the impact that's having on the team and make sure you haven't gone too far. We're all people, especially right now, we're managing a lot of things. So you have to keep a closer eye.
And Tracy, maybe I'll add on to your comments a little bit. I think, Sanjog, as I think about the environment, we operate in a competitive environment as well. And so there is a balance to be struck between driving shareholder value and also being able to compete because our customers want what they want, when they want it, how they want it. Right? And so if a competitor can come in and do that for them, then that's what they're going to go after. So I think it's a tough balance to strike. And I talked earlier about the importance of perspective and leaders sharing perspective. And at least at Pearl in general, what we think about is progress over perfection. We think about pragmatism over dogmatism. And we work in a company that is highly engineered focused. And there are some things where you have to be perfect, right? When you're delivering electricity, it's a dangerous product. But when we talk about customer experiences, where we can make it better, if it's just a little bit better, I'll take that over it being perfect, right? I'll take better tomorrow than perfect a year from now. And I think those are some of the different lenses that leaders could and should be looking through, in my opinion.
Now, when you have done things where the management is rushing you and you cannot rush your people, Tracy, like you mentioned, you just told them, okay, couch that, we'll stop. But then pressure would not stop from your management. That's where you have to be a Hercules? Is that how you have to train yourself now? Because the pressure is mounting on them as well.
No, I don't think so. Sometimes you have to help your team be the Hercules to help and support them. But sometimes you also have to be the strong leader that pushes back on your leadership and says, enough's enough. It's not going to happen. Just because we want it to happen doesn't mean it will. And we have to be strong and have the courage to say that. And I do that regularly. To John's point, like just pushing and saying you want it and demanding things doesn't mean it's going to go in and deliver what you expected with a high degree of quality. And you have to look at what cost. So it doesn't mean you have to push hard all the time, but it doesn't mean we blindly go in and we drop code into production when it's not ready just because someone said we had to deliver on a date. That's not a good idea. It's not something I would ever tell my leadership team to do. I would never say that's an acceptable approach or solution. And if somebody's pushing them on that or I'm being pushed on that, then that needs to be stopped and challenged. That's our job.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Tracy's comment there. At some point, you have to have that roadmap and plan, right? And so if somebody says, hey, be a Hercules and make this happen, you can't, to Tracy's point, you can't just will stuff to happen. You got to have a plan behind it. And I think that's where articulating that plan becomes part of an explanation to senior leaders of here's why we can't do it on this time frame, but here's a path to get something in. So I like to call that the yes and versus the here's all the reasons why we can't. So yes, we can do that, and here's what we need to get that done.
So John, if you had an opportunity to design the next normal leaders management training or development program curriculum, what would you add to it?
Oh boy, there's a lot of great leadership development attributes I think that are already out there. I'll give you just a few of the top ones for me. One, you got to be competitive. I think having a competitive spirit means that you're gonna be resourceful. It means that you can be resilient. So I think that competitiveness is right up there. Two is, I would say, the self-awareness and situational awareness. You got to understand what you're capable of, what you're not capable of. You got to understand your team and the environment around you, right? And I think you got to have edge. And what I mean by that is you got to have courage. You got to have the willingness and the grit to have tough conversations when they need to be had. And I think that goes a long way in building trust. So those are three things that I think are top of mind for me as I think about what this next normal leadership is going to look like.
And do you think these things are not already added to all the leaders who are going through trainings today and or would go tomorrow? Is there anything incremental would you have added there?
I think a lot of this is already incorporated in a lot of leadership development that's out there today. I think it should be prioritized more in an environment where the speed of change is higher than anything I think we've seen in our lifetimes. I think those attributes that I talked about are of even higher importance than they've been in the past, in my opinion.
Tracy, what do you think? Yeah.
Yeah, my comment would be, we're using the word training like it's a class that you take and all of a sudden you're good at all these things. And that's
It's like more management. Yeah, that's what I meant.
yeah, training, and you learn about some of these principles. And I think John gave a great list, and it makes you more aware of those, and it may help you identify gaps or areas that you need to grow or enhance. I think the list is great, but I think the one thing that is most important for leaders is learning, the ability to, when things don't go the way they had planned, or there's failures or even successes, that you sit back and you say, why was that a failure? Or why did that succeed? And what am I going to learn from this? And that's a really hard thing to do, especially in failure, because you go through a lot of stages of, you might be angry, or you may say, it was only this other group had done this, or this person had done that. But you have to set these things aside and say, really do self-reflection and take those learnings and do something with them. Make sure that you don't allow the same things to happen again, or you capitalize on the lessons learned that proved to be very effective and very valuable. So the only thing I would add to John's list would be the ability and willingness to learn and grow.
Tracy, if I were to ask you, given, of course, you're a very accomplished leader leading such a large organization, if there was that one thing that you would fix in you to make you even a stronger leader, more relevant leader for the next normal, what would that be?
One thing I always worry about is I try to be very approachable with my team, my leaders, my direct reports. And sometimes I worry that that I allow them to be, we have very open, candid relationships. Almost there's an informality to it. And depending on the next level or the next leader they may have to support or work with, I often worry that I'm not preparing them as well as I could. So I think it's this, I'm a true extrovert. I really get energized from interactions with people, learning and interacting with them. So that's something I really enjoy and need. And I like that across my leadership team. But I think sometimes that doesn't prepare them as well as it can, or I should for the next level, because I'm not maybe being as tough sometimes as I need to, because we've got this informal kind of relationship. So it's good in a way and it's bad in another. And it's something that I really try and watch out for. I try and have a nice balance.
You can continue to be nice. There's nothing wrong.
No, nice is okay. Kind and respectful and professional are never things that you should substitute. It's not that. It's just not everyone's like that. All right. Not every leader is like that. And I have to prepare them to work with all different types of leaders. And you have to prepare them for that. So I just worry sometimes I'm not as tough her.
You're being vulnerable, which is awesome. This is awesome. Yeah, John, what about you? We'll just close with that. What's one thing that you're going to fix?
One thing that I'm working on, and I'm a work in progress like many leaders are, but for me, Sanjog, I think it's my patience. And there's things that I like to get done quickly, and this comes as part of my competitive nature and as part of me just wanting to deliver value for our customers better than anybody else out there. And I'm working on my patience, Sanjog, right now.
All right, great. Thank you so much, John. And Tracy, again, it was wonderful getting your comments and your vulnerability. I just love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. And listeners, hope you enjoyed it. I grew a few inches taller today, getting all the advice from both John and Tracy, and hope you got some nuggets as well. So please connect us on the different social media, subscribe to our podcast wherever you find podcasts. And once again, thank you for listening to CTN. This is your host, Sanjog Aul. Till next week, take care and God bless.